Welcome to the Springs in the Desert podcast. We're those friends that you can take with you wherever you are on the path of infertility. Hey there, welcome back to the Springs in the Desert podcast. I'm Jillian, your host. And I think I say this every time, but I'm really excited for today's episode because I get to chat with some of my teammates. And it's so great. We are working together on the ministry, serving others. And when we get to just take some time to chat together, it really fills our cups and it, I think, encourages us to keep doing the work that God has called us to do. And so today I have founding Mama Ann. How are you today?
Doing great. Glad to be with you.
Yes. And we have Katie, our small group coordinator. I'm so glad for you to be here. How are you today, Katie?
I'm great. I'm excited to be here.
Woohoo! I think, Katie, did I hear it right that this is your first podcast? This is the first podcast you've recorded. Is that right?
This is my second one. So I did an intro to small groups episode before. That was the very first one. And I have to shamefully admit that I don't really listen to podcasts because I'm just not an audio person. But this is actually the only one I've ever listened to. And not just my own episode. I listened to other ones too.
Praise God. I think it's one of the best. So you're in
it's
good
amazing.
Company.
Yeah. And you're not biased.
Excellent. That's right. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Completely objective opinion. This is the best one.
Right.
Yes. Thanks for reminding me of the small group one. That is a great episode. And we'll link that here for those who are interested in small groups, because if you are in a small group, you would like to start a small group, that's something that you have questions about, Katie is your girl and she can answer all the questions you have about that. Today, though, listeners, we're going back to the basics. We have been talking about some of the basic principles of the experience of infertility for the last couple of episodes. And today we're going to get into the nitty gritty of that. What is infertility? What is that experience like? What does it affect? What's helpful to know about infertility? So we're just going to walk you through that because it's helpful to just, I think, have a good foundational page. And for me, and I think some of the other team members too, when we were first started on the path of infertility or loss, we didn't necessarily realize that is what was happening, that this is the path that I am walking right now. We don't realize that. And so just to explain what some of the situations are that could be happening biologically, there's many different kinds of infertility and related situations. And so I'd like to just start there. And I'm going to start with you because you started this ministry and had your experience that you knew and wanted to serve others in that. So could you tell me a little bit about what is infertility? What was your experience and how the ministry started?
Yeah. And I think what you just said, the way that you introduced that all was so good. And to people who have not had this experience, it may seem weird. Like, how could you not know that's what was going on? Because you weren't getting pregnant or because sadly you lost a child. So what kind of a bubble were you living in? But that was certainly my experience. I have never been pregnant. And for a long time, maybe even for the first couple of years that we were trying, I was, I think, in denial. I didn't want to use that word, infertility. Obviously, I knew that something wasn't working no matter what we tried, what medical interventions, but I just couldn't put that together with you have infertility. And so that's why I think this particular episode is so important. And as I was thinking about it, I took a walk today and I was just thinking about this episode and what we were going to talk about. And it occurred to me that there's two kind of angles that we can take when we talk about the basics and what those basics are. And the first angle is people like us who have the experience of infertility or loss, maybe both, and who maybe need a reminder. So like the people in our community, the people who have been listening a lot to the podcast, they might need a reminder of what these basics are because you get so caught up in everything and the emotions that you lose sight of it. Or especially like for the newer people who are finding us, to lay out what those basics are, because you might be like me And you might be thinking like, well, grief is not a part of my experience because I don't have anything tangible, quote unquote, to grieve, right? Or how can you be in denial about infertility? So I think these basics are really important for that. And then the basics that the people around us don't know, right? And not for their fault. Well, how would you know? How would you know if you're not inside that experience? So as I was thinking about it today, I was thinking just to talk about the basic emotions, the kinds of things that you go through in this experience, and then what people who are outside of the experience might not really understand.
And I think it's really important that you identify those two groups of people, that there are some who I think, especially as in America, I think we've gotten, and globally, but a little bit more health conscious. I think there is a generation who is a little bit more aware that when they're not able to achieve pregnancy, they realize maybe quicker than even I did just a handful of years ago that this is what's happening. But there's also, right, our community, the people who love us. And I think that maybe hasn't changed as much over the years because, as you said, they don't necessarily know what that experience is like if they haven't lived in that experience. I think it's helpful to recognize that getting back to the basics is good for all of us. It's good to just, define our terms, right? Any good conversation is good if you know what you're talking about. So, that's really helpful. And I think I'd like to just start there. Let's define a couple of terms. So, Anne, my experience of infertility is different than yours. So, what's the title of your infertility and defining that?
Yeah, so primary infertility, meaning that we have never been able to get pregnant. And not that this is an infertility diagnosis, but now I have entered into menopause. And so, I will not be able to become pregnant, right? That window has closed. So in our ministry, we add menopause on, not because it's an infertility diagnosis. It is a normal and natural part of a woman's reproductive life. But especially, I think, well, I shouldn't say especially, because no matter what your experience is, once you hit that point, whether it's menopause or a definitive diagnosis, that the possibility is gone, there is a grief that comes with that. So for me, the grief of never having experienced a pregnancy and now knowing that I never will, that certainly has been a process for me to go through.
Yeah, and thanks for sharing that and primary infertility. Katie, would you mind telling our listeners what your experience of infertility is?
Yeah, mine is also primary infertility. And like you guys spoke about, I did not put that label on it way back when. I think I was trying to remember. I think I just said, we're having trouble trying for a baby. But I never put the infertility label on it until years later. But my experience is also primary infertility. I have endometriosis. And then at my most recent surgery, I was also diagnosed with adenomyosis. And I did experience one miscarriage about 6 years into our infertility. We're going on 8 years now. So, yeah.
Thanks for sharing that, Katie. And so I think what's been beautiful about the team is that every single team member has a different path that they've walked on infertility. And I think that while in other episodes of the podcast, Anne has explained that different types of infertility weren't necessarily on her mind when they founded the ministry, that it has really provided, I think, a well-rounded approach to serving the community, to see that even someone who has primary infertility, who meets another person with primary infertility, they might have very different paths. And that could be not only with diagnoses and treatments, but loss history, both partner history. There's a lot of facets to that. And so, thank you both for sharing your story. My story is that we conceived two children early on in our first year of marriage and lost both of them to miscarriage. And then we were not able to conceive for several years after. And so while this isn't the typical way that secondary infertility is defined, that is the group that I would fall under, is secondary infertility, that I was able to conceive and carry for some amount of time, but then unable to conceive after. But typically, secondary infertility looks like a couple who has a child, two children, or a number of children, and then are unable to conceive at some point after that. We were able to conceive my son several years after that, but with no diagnosis. And so there was no successful treatment or medication that helped with that. And so that's also an experience that can look vastly different for every couple who has secondary infertility. Another, I think, definition that is important to define is male factor infertility. And Anne and I were actually just we were interviewed by Word on Fire, their institute, and we were talking about how there isn't a lot of data on male factor infertility. And so treatments and knowledge about that is just less. And so it's, I think, an experience that just doesn't have a wide amount yet of data of even couples who have maybe gone to that step of having treatment or data or research for their husband. But male factor is also another experience that I think is important to talk about. I want to jump back into, Anne, what you were talking about, the related instances. There's menopause, right? I have miscarriage. And I'm wondering, Anne, if you could just say a couple of words about how those maybe dive a little bit deeper into how you said menopause has now added, right, to your path of infertility. And how do some of these additional components on the path add to that experience of infertility?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And this is one of those things, again, from that angle of people who are on the outside who don't have infertility or miscarriage as part of their experience, can fail to realize how complex the whole thing really is. And so from my own personal experience, and then in all of these years of ministering, it can take a while to even come to terms with the idea of grieving, right? That especially for me, primary infertility, like what do I have to grieve? And now on the other side of it with menopause, how can I grieve a lost dream or a lost expectation? Like you can't hold on to that. And so I think in those ways, people begin to feel like that's somehow illegitimate. And so they don't want to express it, or they don't think that they can. And I think that just compounds a lot of the difficulties that they have, the emotions that they feel, the jealousy and anger, those kinds of things that can pop up, our relationship with God, right? Because we just don't know how to deal with that. And we may have never met anybody else who has expressed any of those same feelings, whether or not they have a similar experience to ours. And you mentioned secondary infertility. I know from ministering that we will have women who come on a retreat or they come to a small group and they're almost afraid to talk about the fact that they have a living child or two living children maybe. And they have expressed to me that they feel guilty even talking about it because they don't want to hurt anyone else that's in that group. And then they also sometimes feel guilty for not being, quote unquote, grateful enough, right? Why am I not thankful for what I have? So we could go on, and the experiences are as different as the number of people who are having them, right? But I think what I'd like our listeners, whether they're people who are going through it, people in our community, or people who love them and want to support them, is to understand that all of this is way more complex than, oh, you poor guys, you couldn't have kids. So much more is involved.
Yeah, you put that so well, Anne. And let's talk about some of those complexities. Why is it hard? Why is this difficult to experience? And so, Katie, I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about some of the physical reasons it's hard. You mentioned that you've had some surgeries. And so, just in general, what are some of the physical difficulties that a couple might experience in infertility?
Yeah, I know, like, for me and for a lot of the women that I have spoken with, just constant surgeries. And way back when my husband and I first started trying, we had only been trying for about 6 months, and my doctor recommended an exploratory surgery. And at the time I thought, that's crazy. Why would I have a surgery 6 months in? I don't even know if anything's wrong. That seems really extreme. Of course, now I wish I'd done it then and not, 2 years later. But like, it's the constancy of the surgeries. Even with my most recent one, my doctor told me now the recommendation is to have surgery every 2 years. And I have to be honest, I'm definitely not doing that. But what a wild recommendation. But even if surgery isn't like a part of your story, it's the injections. I know I did the HCG injections. It's the hormone supplements, the pills that they might put you on. And it's just like all of these different things that are like your body is already going haywire. And now you're doing all of these things and making your body go even more haywire. And so it's just, there are a lot of different like medicines and regimens. And that's only a fraction of it. I've heard about people going to acupuncture. I've heard about people going to the chiropractor. There are all these physical treatments and things that people are trying, and they're putting their body through so much stress with all of these different treatments with varied results.
Yeah, that's a good picture. And I think I I've heard, and I could hear someone say, well, why go through that then? If you're so physically exhausted, right? Because the good is the desire for a child and to grow your family. And that's a really great good. And our desires are given by God, and we are communal as human beings. So that's a very, not just a natural thing to desire offspring, but it's a very spiritual intimate part of our desire to carry on our family and to teach and to hand off and to grow a community and be a part of that. And so I think that sometimes the why is forgotten there as well, or it just isn't as clear maybe to someone who, again, isn't in that experience. And I'm wondering if you have thoughts about that.
I sure do. So as you were speaking, this is so good. And as you were speaking, I was thinking, one of the basics that I think we need to get back to is that it is a very great good, and treatment is especially a great good if it restores a woman to good health. And that is really the priority. But it's also something to be discerned as you go along. It's not, and I don't think it's something like, okay, we're going to try for 3 years and then that'll be it. I think it's something to revisit as you go along. And when you get news like Katie, okay, every 2 years you're going to have a surgery. Okay, wait a minute. We have to maybe sit and talk about that. It's also, I think, a reminder about how you choose your provider. And I'm also aware that finding good Catholic providers is not always easy because they're not everywhere in every town. So I put that caveat on it. But to let people know that you have a right to and deserve good care, and a doctor, a healthcare professional who will listen to you and will have a conversation with you. And so it is basic to have that kind of relationship with your healthcare provider, to be able to be honest to them and say, hey, this regimen is making me crazy, or I feel sick, or I'm really scared about having another surgery. And to have them actually have a dialogue with you and to not make you feel any more guilty than you might already be making yourself, because you didn't do the surgery 2 years earlier, or you opted not to do that treatment. None of us can tell anyone how far to go with these treatments, like how long to go. That's an individual decision and one you have to make with your spouse and with your healthcare provider. But I think the starting point is I am good, my body is good, and my health is worth really taking into account, even over and above what happens with my fertility.
Absolutely. And I think, as you said, discernment. I have lived on both parts of the spectrum, that I've been in treatments where I've looked at my kitchen counter and it is full of medications and supplements that I am putting a ton of hope into. And also, I work in a medical clinic and we offer infertility evaluations because it's so dear to so many of our staff's heart, and the both and that this is something that's an ongoing discernment. And also, right, the research is also ongoing. And so that I think is something that's important too, that not only for those who have infertility, those who are supporting those with infertility, that there are new studies, new understandings that are happening all of the time. And so it's also a challenge for a couple who's discerning treatment to know, well, what if I just wait 6 months and more data is found? Or what if it's not, right? Katie's saying, I wish I would have had that exploratory surgery 6 months in instead of 2 years in. And that's additional grief, the things that are just outside of your control. We can't tell the future. We can't tell what science is going to discover. I would say the thing that we can be so grateful for is that there are really good doctors who are looking into ethical and root cause treatments so that, as you said, Anne, we can be restored to health. That is a good. Our health is a good. And so yeah, physically, there's a lot of complexities there. It is not just I'm tired or I'm not able to conceive a child or whatever the symptom you're feeling in that moment. There's so many pieces to that, so many things to consider in that sphere, the physical sphere. So let's move into emotional. I think this is a big one because it's often not seen. We carry our emotions pretty close to our hearts oftentimes, especially men. And so, Anne, I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about some of the emotional aspects of infertility. How does it affect women, men, couples?
Yeah, there is sadness. There might be anger. There might be feelings of desperation. Spiritually, there can be feelings of abandonment, like where is God? It really can cut to the core of your identity and your self-esteem. What's wrong with me? Or why is my body rebelling against me? And that can just cause a lot of anxiety, and you can really spiral. Your thoughts can really spiral. And then, of course, the male-female difference, and compounded on top of all that is your family of origin and how you were raised. Were you raised to bottle up your emotions? Or did you live in a house where it was always very loud and people were expressive? So it can be difficult if your husband and you came from those two extremes, right? But it can also be difficult if you were raised in the same way, like if you're both bottling up your emotions, right? Or if you're both just super emotional. So I think one of the basics is we are different, right? Our experiences are different. How we understand or have difficulty understanding what's going on in our bodies, in our lives, in our marriages, that's normal. You're not out of the norm. You're not crazy. You're not weak for having these emotions. So it's really important to be in touch with yourself and with your thoughts and your feelings. If you're a journaler, journal. If you like to go to adoration and pour your heart out to Jesus with everything, go and pour that out. If you need counseling, and we have some great counselors who are contributors to the ministry, that is, I think, a brave and a strong step, because this is hard. This is a really hard experience. And to just do it on your own, yeah, I wish I had gone to counseling when we were in the middle of it. I was that like pull myself up by my bootstraps type. And in hindsight, I wish that I had, because I think I could have benefited from it. And then husband and wife, you're in this together. This is not my cross. This is not his cross. This is our cross. We're carrying it together. But it's also our opportunity to be fruitful together. So we got to check in with each other. We got to talk to each other. If we blow up at each other, or if a lot of the times it's like, why isn't my husband reacting exactly the way that I want him to, right? It's ridiculous. So to be able to go to them and say, gosh, I'm so sorry I responded that way. Or to talk to your spouse and say, hey, this is how I'm feeling. This is how you can help me. Or especially ladies, because so much the emphasis is on us, right? Hey, saying to your husband, honey, how are you doing with this? How can I support you? So yeah, I think communication is so key.
Couldn't have said that better, Anne. I think that was a really succinct way of just, yeah, a lot of the emotional challenges that come with infertility. And our marriage is that primary, this is where what we've been called to, like our missionary field is in our home, our domestic church. And so that's a really important relationship to protect and nourish and come back to, because yes, individually, there are physical, emotional, spiritual difficulties, but also together. And to, yeah, make sure that we're checking in there too, I think is really important. And our marriage, right, is just one of the relationships that infertility can impact. And so, Katie, I'm wondering if you could just give maybe a couple of examples of some of the other relationships in our lives that could be affected by the path of infertility.
Oh, so many. Where do I begin? The rest of your family is a big one, right? Like any siblings, parents. It can be so hard especially when you have other siblings who are married and can have children, no problem. Like there's this nuance of you're happy for them. And as an aunt or uncle, you're excited about this new niece or nephew. But also there's still that sting that's always there of, but why not me? And then you're constantly surrounded by this person who is pregnant and is getting to experience this. And so the siblings can be difficult. The parents can be difficult. And not that they're intending to, not that any of these people are doing anything wrong, but just this parents always hope for grandchildren. And maybe they're even getting them from other children, but still there's that you want to give them grandchildren too. And even just friendships, like I have this best friend and she's incredible and I love her so much and she's been such a great support to me. But she's also never going to know what this experience is like. She had children with no problem. And I'm glad for her. I love her children. I consider them my niece and my nephews, but she's never going to know what this is like. And so as much as we can talk about it, there's still this place where she's never going to fully understand this part of my life. And so I think it's just there are all these ways that like all of your relationships can be changed and feel different through the lens of infertility, through trying to find your place in the world without being able to bring kids into the mix.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes and yes to all of that. And I'm wondering if you could share maybe a couple of the non-familial relationships that could be affected in maybe our professional or spiritual lives. What are some of the other relationships that might be a little bit challenging because of infertility?
You mentioned professional relationships. So at work, when coworkers are either pregnant and there's baby showers, or your coworkers have children and so they talk about them a lot, which of course they should. That's something that's really normal. But I think the professional kind of situation can be really challenging because, there you are, you're at work. You can't just burst into tears in the middle of a staff meeting or something, right? So I think there are particular challenges there. And if it's possible to have a friend there, one of your coworkers that you're close to, and if you feel comfortable sharing, to have sort of an ally in the office, like someone who you can go to or someone who knows, who can, if there's an office baby shower, and they can key in like, okay, I see where Anne's mind is going. So I'm going to come in and rescue her. Maybe we got to go get more ice, or we have to do something, or she has to come in and start a conversation. And so I think those kinds of things can be helpful. And then, gosh, I think one of the biggest relationships is with God. And I think this is something, again, another basic for the people who are outside of this experience, right? They pray for us, which is great. Please do that. And they often suggest a lot of prayers that we could do. Do this novena, go to this pilgrimage site. That's all really wonderful too. But I think people don't realize the kind of pressure sometimes that can place on a person, a couple who's going through infertility, because our relationship can become strained with God. We don't know whether to beg him or to just shut him out completely. We don't know if he's working with us or if he's punishing us. These are the kinds of thoughts that go on. And it can be easy to become obsessed with prayer and to think that somehow we can merit the gift of children if we just say the right prayer or we go to the right saint. So I would say for people who are wanting to accompany a couple, a person who is struggling with infertility, to be delicate about their, first of all, let them know that you're praying for them, and be in a relationship with them and hear from them and know where they are before you start suggesting, because we can get overwhelmed. Oh my gosh, okay, there's 5 different novenas I have to say, and who are all those saints I'm supposed to pray for? It can get really overwhelming. And I have to say, I mean, there's someone in the community who told us once that a friend of hers was also walking the path of infertility and then got pregnant, and then said to her, well, maybe you're just not praying enough. So that is definitely something you should not ever say. We should never say that to anybody, but certainly not say that to a person who's going through this, because trust me, we are already carrying enough of that weight of wondering where God is and what he is doing in our lives.
Yeah, I want to echo what Katie said earlier, about family, that what we've been talking about throughout the episode, that we know that, right, the human heart has good intentions, right? That's typically where these conversations or these comments are coming from, is that they want your desires to be fulfilled. They want you to receive the gift you've been asking for. They want your prayers to be answered. And while that is a really good thing, I think something that we as a team have pondered, and the image that I think is the most helpful, is Simon, who helps Jesus carry the cross. That Simon didn't necessarily say, here I am, let me help Jesus carry this cross, right? And that's okay. It's okay to be the person who says, I'm here and I'd love to support you. But the carrying of the cross might be a bit silent. It might be just simply asking, how can I pray for you? How can I support you through this? How can I walk with you? Would you like to come over for dinner? Just providing a space for someone to say what would be helpful to them. And this isn't just for infertility. I think this is just a human experience. Oftentimes assumptions get us in tricky situations, when we are assuming how someone feels or what their intentions are, what they are doing, what the goal is there. And so really just giving an open space for them to answer whenever they're ready to answer. And if someone doesn't answer right away, offer it again after a while. Check in with them. And I think another thing is that, yeah, this grief and this experience is not linear. I am someone who likes checklists. I like to meet my goals. I like to see the progress and the end date and complete something and take it off of my list. But that is not the spiritual life. That is not grief. So there are many things along the path that can bring up a lot of challenging emotions. And so, yeah, being a Simon and carrying that cross all the way. And it might be lighter at some times, and it might be heavier at other times. It's just so complex. There's so many angles, and walking together with a Simon can be sometimes the best way to just make it to that next station, that next piece of discernment, that next season that we are entering into. Anne and Katie, thank you for talking about the basics. I would like to leave our listeners with just one piece of encouragement. And you could choose whether it's maybe a couple who's carrying the cross or someone who is of support or both of them. But what's just one thing about infertility that you hope that they understand, that is encouragement for them, that they can carry with them in their toolbox as they go forward in their marriage and on this path? And I'll start with you. What would you like to say?
Yeah, so if there's anyone listening who is carrying this cross, just know that God loves you. He is not punishing you. He has good things for you. It may be hard to see that, might be hard to hear that, but your marriage is good and it's needed. It's necessary in this world. And for those who are trying to walk with someone, with a couple who's carrying this cross, someone, who loves them and is feeling really helpless, it's a lot simpler than you might think. Just be there with them, just love them. And once in a while, just affirm them, like how great their marriage is, what they bring to the family, to the parish, to your friendship group, whatever it might be. Just be encouraging and loving. Don't feel like you have to fix it, because honestly, you can't.
How about you, Katie? What would you say?
Yeah, I think I would just say I used to have a hard time with the fact that God's first commandment was be fruitful and multiply. But I think my encouragement would just be to those experiencing infertility, there are so many different ways that you can multiply. There's so much life you can bring into the world. You can multiply art, you can multiply friendships, you can multiply love and beauty and laughter and caring for people. There's so much that you can bring into the world aside from just what your body can do, aside from having children. And yeah, to those who are maybe supporting friends and family with infertility, I would just echo what Anne and Jillian, what you guys have both said in terms of you can just be there for them, ask them what they need, ask them what would be most helpful. I know I have needed very different things at very different points of my infertility. And sometimes what I needed was them to not ask at all. So just ask like how you can best support them and let them tell you what they need in that moment. And that's the most beautiful gift of support you could give them.
Thank you, ladies. I am just so grateful to have had this time with you. And I know that God is going to provide this episode to the ears that need to hear it. Listeners, I always encourage this, so please share this. Maybe it's just with your spouse. And you two can become a little bit more aware of the aspects of infertility and how it's affecting each other or your marriage. Or maybe it's someone, a Simon in your life, who's asking, how can I be a support to you? And you're maybe struggling to explain all the pieces that are making this puzzle of your life, this tapestry that God is designing. Maybe you could send it to them, and it might be a good starting off point, a good conversation point for you to talk about, okay, now that you've listened to this, I'd like to tell you a little bit about what I'm specifically feeling. I hope that this can be a good resource for you as you walk the path and as you're supporting those who are walking the path. And if I would leave the listeners with anything, I just want to affirm that God is so present to you right now. He is working in your life right now. He has not forgotten about you. He sees you, he understands you, and he loves you so much. And so do we. See you next time on the podcast. Thank you so much for joining us for this Springs in the Desert podcast episode. We would be so grateful if you took a minute to rate and review us so that we can reach more listeners. Don't forget to check out our social media pages on Facebook and Instagram, and go to our website, springsinthedesert.org, where you can sign up for our newsletter and community prayer list, read our blog, and register for virtual and in-person events. Most importantly, remember that God loves you so much, and so do we.